Instead of this attempt to undermine the law, the appropriate way is to identify ways to reduce excessive spending through the bipartisan annual appropriations process. No, you guys go do that, okay? And you come up with something that is not unconstitutional or at least anti-American as it's interpreted by the duly elected president who runs the executive branch.
You know, I was just in New England on a 6-state swing in 4 days, talking to submarine shipyard builders. I mean, we're seeing people are excited about the investments that the president is making.
USAID, that Democrat superstructure, is now on its way out. Rubio posted this to celebrate a little Labor Day, because of course our labor gets taxed and then it goes to these USAID people and it pays for their grift. Somebody's paying for that. Yeah, it's us. And now Rubio is responding to this. He says, you know, I joked with President Trump that I had 4 jobs. We saw that during the cabinet meeting. Hilarious. He told me to give one to my friend, Russ Vought. So I did one of the 4 jobs. Get it? And with a small set of core programs moved over to the State Department, USAID is officially in closeout mode, baby. And we love that phrase. What a nice statement that is. Close it out. Russ is now at the helm to oversee the closeout of agency that long ago went off the rails. Congrats, Russ. Yeah, we're excited for you. What a nice promotion. And congratulations to Rubio too. You now have 3 jobs. An entire agency is in closeout mode. Good to see. He also said, since assuming office, Trump is committed to rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse from the US government, saving American workers billions of dollars. Now, for the first time in 50 years, the president is using his authority under the Impoundment Control Act to deploy a pocket rescission, canceling $5 billion in foreign aid and international organization funding that violates the president's America First priorities. Among items being canceled are the following: $2.7 million for inclusive democracy programs in South Africa, whatever that means, $4 million for global LGBTQI awareness, and for the Global Labor Program. None of these programs are in America's interest, which is why the president is taking decisive action to put America and Americans first. Thank you, Marco Rubio, for that. And there's an interesting, I mean, these are small numbers, like $4 million, that's peanuts compared to $5 billion. So it's just like hundreds, if not thousands of these little programs. You get 2 million, 2 million, 2 million, 2 million. No one looks, it's 2 million, 4 million. It's going to, you know, awareness, whatever. And then you add it all up to $5 billion. Do you know how much money that is and how much we could do with that as a country? But instead, we're just funneling it out to other weird freak show organizations all across the planet, but not anymore. And so the rescissions have come down, and this is what it looked like. This is when Trump dropped it. He says, yeah, it's being rescinded, and I'm following the law. Impoundment Control Act of 1974, which is what they passed when they were very upset with Nixon or impounding funds. He says, I'm reporting the president, your favorite president, 15 rescissions of budget authority totaling $4.9 billion. The proposed rescissions affect programs at the Department of State and USAID, and it's now canceled. And so enjoy it. Now, Trump also submitted a response to this in the courts, explaining why this is not irreparable harm, why they're not entitled to money endlessly as government grifters, and we'll come back to it. But here is the reaction from the left. Very upset about this. Over from the Hill, they said, Trump tosses a grenade, all right, into the GOP shutdown battle with pocket rescissions. Pocket rescissions grenade. Yes, we're for them. Says here, President Trump's new effort is canceling more money, pocket rescissions, and look, here's a roundup of all the people screeching about it. Chuck Schumer, he said in a statement, Trump and congressional Republicans are hellbent on rejecting bipartisanship and going it alone this fall. All right. He says the country's staring down next month's funding deadline on September 30th. It's clear that neither Trump nor the Republicans have any plans to avoid an unnecessary shutdown. Susan Collins also came out. She was crying about it. She posted this over here. She said, you know, Congress has received from the administration a $4.9 billion package of proposed rescissions of funding that have previously been appropriated, says Susan Collins. Given that this package was sent to Congress very close at the end of the fiscal year, when the funds are scheduled to expire, this is an apparent attempt to rescind appropriated funds without congressional approval. Now, the GAO has concluded that this type of rescission is unlawful. We don't think so. And we don't really care what the GAO has to say about it, because they're not running the country. They're not the president, all right? Trump is. Thank you, Susan. Says Article 1 of the Constitution makes clear that Congress has the responsibility for the power of the purse, says another constitutional illiterate. Yeah, that is true, but Congress, your branch, Susan, delegated all of that over. Well, actually, that's not true. They didn't delegate any of it over. This has been within the executive branch from the get-go. Let me be clear about that. This is the tension between the take care clause and the necessary and proper clause. Necessary and proper is the the power of the purse. Appropriations. They didn't even have to delegate it. The take care clause said that you receive the money and then you take care to execute the law appropriately using the money that's properly appropriated to you. That's the tension. And if Congress doesn't like it, then they can impeach the president. It's how it's always been. Otherwise, Congress is also executing the law just by proxy. Well, you have to spend this money to do this thing. And then the president has to go and do that thing, even if it's against the interest of the country. That's an improper check on the Congress. And we are in a society, actually all societies are, where the elites materialize and matriculate up to the top. And our goal is to have them pitted against each other so that it's not a big love fest between the two. So that Congress just doesn't say, well, we're just going to pass billions. And then it goes over to Joe Biden. He's like, perfect, billions for AIDS doctors all over Africa, right? That's ridiculous. It's not in the interest of America. And so if you have somebody else who says actually to take care appropriately of the government of America, like you're obligated to do under the Constitution, that means not doing what they're doing. And their check is to impeach him if they want to do it. So she doesn't even understand those basic principles. And impeach him then. Any effort to rescind the funds is a clear violation of the law. So what are you going to do about it, Susan? Instead of this attempt to undermine the law, the appropriate way is to identify ways to reduce excessive spending through the bipartisan annual appropriations process. No, you guys go do that, okay? And you come up with something that is not unconstitutional or at least anti-American as it's interpreted by the duly elected president who runs the executive branch. It says any effort to rescind these funds is illegal. This month, we intend to mark this up. The annual funding bill is the most appropriate way to ensure that any rescissions reflect the views of Congress. Well, then go do it. But the president's not obligated to spend your money for anti-American things that aren't in the interest of taking care of America. That's his constitutional prerogative. And you don't get to force him to do the executive branch's job because you're not the president. All right, so now this money is going over to these ridiculous organizations. And so again, one of the lawsuits that is happening right now is this one. In the District of Columbia, Global Health Council, and this was also the et al. So it was all the AIDS doctors and, Africa AIDS, whatever, coalition for AIDS vaccines that don't exist. And we're going to advocate for AIDS vaccines. Well, they don't exist yet. Well, no, but we're going to advocate for them. Oh, great. And so you're in the medical industry and you deserve $1 billion to do it because you, like many other people, want an AIDS vaccine or something? Well, go do that on your own time. Go start a blog, which is essentially what this is. And so we've tried to identify what this organization actually does from their public-facing things. And they sued President Trump. This document is Trump's response to them, their opposition. They're saying, give us our money. Trump is responding saying to the court, we don't need to give them any money. This is Trump's opposition to the Global Health Council and their request for their money. They say, all right, look, court, in vacating the requirement that the State Department and USAID pay the money, the DC Circuit Court of Appeals properly concluded, and we're going back now down to the lower level courts, concluded that they had not shown irreparable harm, right, to the cancellation of the funds. And now they fare no better in showing irreparable harm to sustain their motion for a TRO or summary judgment. In fact, their new declarations are assuming that we're not going to give them all of the money that is expiring, but that is incorrect. That's not what's happening. Rather, they say, of the $11.5 billion in pertinent expiring funds, Trump and the administration are advancing a multi-step process. So they're analyzing it. They are going to give out $6.5 billion gross, consistent with available authorities that they have to under the law, including notifications to Congress and negotiation with the responsible officials and more. Now, they have no irreparable harm from, and they have no need for any relief concerning those funds. Okay, so like a big portion of this, like you're going to get your money, you whiny babies. Here, take your $6.5 billion that you stole from us. And this is so interesting because it's always like the left right now, the current refrain is them screeching about how the Trump administration, right, how the American consumer is paying for tariffs, which I think is debatable. I think you could say that the margins in some of the foreign companies were so high because they were paying other countries tariffs that we weren't charging them, so they could just eat the costs and still complete the production of the goods in alignment with the cost curve that they need to have. But they keep screeching at us. Somebody's paying for that stuff. The American consumer's paying for those tariffs. Like what? It's just a different mechanism of using incentives. Like we were paying for this. What's $6.5 billion going to these whack job AIDS doctors all across the country nobody cares about except Democrats? It's a scam and they were stealing it from us. At least with the tariffs, we're getting some leverage out of it. We're getting trade deals and negotiated resolutions and using it as leverage rather than just giving the money out. Anyways, there is a separate category now of approximately $4 billion in expiring funds that we're going to cancel. And we transmitted a message to Congress under the Impoundment Control Act proposing those funds for rescission. And the DC Circuit Court of Appeals made clear that these councils cannot obtain injunctive relief under the APA, which does not supply a cause of action when another statute precludes judicial review, which it does here. So in other words, you can't file here. The law says we set up an entire system, a court system. If you're upset about losing your government contract or your government money, we get it. I know it's a sob story. Everyone's going to die immediately. You need it. Okay, go over here and make your claim. You don't get to sue in a federal court, Article 3 court. Plaintiffs, nevertheless, now seek to reinstall the vacated injunction. They're just swapping their theory out. The Court of Appeals already sent it down. They seize on the DC Circuit's denial of their motion for a rehearing en banc when the panel amended its opinion. So Trump was trying to leapfrog them essentially to get them to answer. Then they came back, they mooted out the en banc. And so there's some weird procedural stuff going on. But now it's back down to the district court and saying now they're just trying to swap the theory. Okay, the original circuit said that you can't do this. They're not required to give the funds out. Then the full panel just kind of changed it a little bit, sent it back down, and now we're re-arguing just a different kind of twisted point. Now, on that basis, they seek a proposed TRO, saying it doesn't require them to actually obligate the appropriations, right? It's not, you can't force them to do it, but it's just taking preparatory steps. And they say, wait a minute, but that's not just for the 6.5 billion. They also want the 4 billion. Okay, so now they're trying to lop it into the total amount. But neither one of these funds are appropriately forced to be paid to them, says Trump. Now, as to the funds that we are going to pay or working on it, the steps that we are taking to reflect the opposite of agency decisions not to obligate the funds. So we're actually showing you we're going to give you the money and you're still mad about it. And given that we're making our best efforts to meet the deadline, their claims that we're delaying this is also unfounded. Now, as to the funds described in the special message that was transmitted to Congress from Trump, despite their effort to paint this dispute about this provision of the law, their lengthy discussion is again premised on the ICA. And even if their understanding of this other law were correct, and it's not, the president's special message to Congress is legitimate. And under our view of the ICA, the Impoundment Control Act, those funds described in the special message would only be available for obligation if that period concludes without Congress passing a rescission bill, by which point the funds would have been expired anyways. And so they appear to disagree with that view, but the DC Circuit said that they can't use the APA to enforce that claim. And Trump submitted his message pursuant to the DC Circuit, and it was less than 45 days from September 30th. So even as to this other provision of the law, they're still not going to win on this either. That law provides no specific commands to provide specific funds on a specific timetable. It doesn't say we have to pay you this amount by this time or else. So it's ambiguity. And now they're asking for mandamus. They want you to force us to do something based on this weak provision of the law that doesn't even give them the power. And the remaining equitable factors also favor Trump. The DC Circuit Court of Appeals determined that the equitable balance supported the vacature, the elimination of the forced payments, and expedited issuance of the mandate. Now then, they furnished the court with nothing new to justify departing from the Court of Appeals. They say it's new, but it's not. And this is, of course, in the sensitive foreign policy context in which the president has maximum wingspan power, because that's his prerogative. The TRO and the preliminary injunction motion should be denied. An embedded summary judgment motion should be severed and also denied, courtesy of the Trump DOJ. So they zoom in for further detail on that. But you get the gist of it. They're saying the money is lawfully rescinded. They have no power to do it and to keep those funds obligated. And PBS, one of the agencies, not necessarily a part of USAID, but also on the chopping block with that federal government money. What are they doing with that money? Making 30-minute documentaries about the end of USAID. Oh no, they're losing everything. And then they go through, it's AIDS, everybody with AIDS. All the AIDS doctors in Africa, it's going to be all the doctors, USAID, yep, see, here you go. Everyone's going to die hospital. You're basically killing people, is what this guy looks like it says. Is that what this says? Yeah, baby cannot breathe. You just need it, and you need to resuscitate the baby. Babies are dying. This guy's listening to news. Everyone's dying around the world. We hope that they're doing well. I don't want suffering around the world at all. But I feel like the USAID people have been on this for a long time, and nothing's gotten better. In fact, things are dramatically worse in many ways. And I think their new ideology is not necessarily about like providing food to starving people in Africa, which is also a curious thing. Is that the game forever? Like we're just gonna keep providing food forever and ever and ever and ever? Or is there a way to build up their economy and their society so that they can deliver for themselves, you know, teach a man to fish kind of a thing? But anyways, the point here is that money was going over there, and I think really most of it was going to not food or resources or infrastructure, but mostly to lots chopping off genitals or encouraging people to do so. And now we've got the Labor Secretary on this Labor Day explaining the administration is tired of having our taxpayer dollars stolen from us, because that's all it is. You mix your time and your life, your energy with the world around you, and you create a good or service. So that's your life being transmuted into something. In exchange for that good or service, you get money. So when the government takes 40% of that or more, that's a theft of your life. And we're pretty tired of it, okay? And it's been something where we've had a lot of taxation really without any representation. And you might say, well, you've got your 435 representatives. That's still a pittance of the actual share of representation that the citizens during the founding era had. Why are we not entitled to that same slice of representation where it's 1 to 50,000 back then? Now it's 1 to 700, 800,000. So point is, we want fiscal sanity because it's our livelihood that is being stolen from us, and the inflation is doing the same. Here's the Labor Secretary explaining. We're on it.
Well, what we're seeing is unemployment definitely holding steady, but we're seeing real wages up. We're seeing blue collar wages up 1.4%. Consumer confidence is up. I'm on my 50-state tour across this country. I've hit 32 states already, and I'm talking to the men and women who are on the ground every single day, trying to understand what they need assistance with. So some of the things that we've done, expansion of Pell Grants through the One Big Beautiful Bill, which will give access to so many people who had maybe a barrier to further education. The apprenticeship program. The president wants 1 million active apprentices. And so I'm on the ground talking to the trades, talking to the firefighters, talking to law enforcement. You know, I was just in New England on a 6-state swing in 4 days, talking to submarine shipyard builders. I mean, we're seeing people are excited about the investments that the president is making.
Yeah, because those are actually useful things, right? You're actually creating something, you're doing construction, building something, and using your hands to develop a good or service versus sitting around and working on your PhD thesis for transgender playwriting in Berkeley. We're not interested in that. That doesn't produce anything good for anybody other than your own freak enjoyment. And now the country is returning to some normalcy. USAID in closeout mode. We're happy to see it. What a nice Labor Day celebration. All those USAID people are going to have a lot of time to celebrate not laboring.